when discussing manned space missions, the two American programs that are the most talked about are the Mercury and Apollo programs. One program that does not get as much attention, but which was instrumental in getting man to the moon, was Project Gemini. The Gemini missions flew between the Mercury and Apollo programs and allowed astronauts and planners to practice many of the procedures that would be important for future moon flights, paving the way for man to walk on the moon. Early in January of 1962, Project Gemini began. Because of the large time frame between Project Mercury and the Apollo flights, it became clear to NASA officials that more training in spaceflight was necessary to get men to the moon and back safely. Unlike the Mercury capsule, which could only hold one astronaut, the aptly named Gemini capsule could hold two astronauts and could be maneuvered in space by the crew. The ability to maneuver in space allowed astronauts to train for space rendezvous and docking. Learning these procedures would be critical to successfully return from the lunar surface and docking with the command module in lunar orbit. Gemini also needed to provide useful information about how the human body and man-made equipment would respond in the harsh environment of space. Up to that time, no one knew exactly what would happen to astronauts after being exposed to long-term microgravity. The program would consist of 10 manned missions, all of which were to be completed in 12 months. After 2 unmanned missions, the first manned mission, Gemini 3, was launched on March 23, 1965. The flight was a complete success, proving how easily the astronauts could maneuver the craft. The flights that followed all saw success as well, including the first American spacewalk on Gemini 4, the first docking with 2 vehicles in space by Gemini 8, and a long-duration mission which lasted 14 days by Gemini 7. With the final flight of Gemini 12, all of the major objectives were met, as well as many other mission objectives. With all the critical theories tested and proven, it was time for Apollo to go for the moon. The 10 manned Gemini flights spanned 603 days and accumulated over 1,940 man-hours in space. Of the 20 astronauts who trained for the Gemini flights, 15 of them went on to subsequently fly on Apollo missions in the lunar program. As the successes grew in Project Gemini, it became clear that man could, should, and would fly to the moon and back safely, making history in the process.
Because the crew consisted of 2 astronauts, the project was named Gemini for the third constellation's twin stars, Castor and Pollux. Coming up, we'll find out how NASA is helping to reduce aircraft noise. But first, did you know that the Gemini 3 was the only Gemini spacecraft to have a nickname? Because capsule commander Gus Grissom's previous spaceflight ended in the sinking of the Liberty Bell 7 capsule in the Atlantic Ocean, Grissom decided to name his capsule the Molly Brown, after the Broadway musical, The Unsinkable Molly Brown.